Hi, this week we are joined by Lærke, who is Assistant News Editor at ITN.
Hi.
So can you let everyone know a little bit about your job and what your responsibilities are and just what your day-to-day is like?
Sure. So I'm on a freelance basis, assistant news editor at ITN. And what that basically means is I help the editor and help sort of the team get through the day. So ITV News has 3 daily programs. We have half an hour at lunch, half an hour at 6 o'clock, and half an hour at roughly 10 o'clock. Um, and so there are different shifts, home, foreign, London, planning, and producing. And they all kind of have the same building blocks to them. So the home shift is sort of the main of the shifts and the one that you will learn to do first. And it starts at 6 in the morning and finishes at 7 in the evening. Um, it's basically, I like to think of it as the job title is assistant news editor, but I like to think of it more as assistant to the editor. So the editor, sort of the news editor, leads the day. They kind of come in the morning and you come in with them and you sort of read through, well, what's been planned, and then also think about, well, what's happened sort of overnight and what do we need to sort of stand up on the day. So you kind of split the day into two. So the editor will deal mostly with the reporters and the satellite trucks. And then you, as the assistant news editor, will deal with the cameras and the sort of logistics around travel. So that's a really big part of your day, is making sure that the commitments that we've made, somebody shows up there with a camera and somebody shows up there and asks some questions. And that is sort of the big thing. And then along with that, also your bidding, your licensing picture from social media, if that's relevant, and also dealing with guests for a lunchtime program. We always have live guests on our lunchtime program. Currently they're on Skype or Zoom, but I think that's quite common for everyone. On the foreign side, obviously you don't have the cameras because they're all out and about in the world, but you do still deal with sort of some travel logistics sometimes. They'll call up and say, can we, book a hotel here or there? On foreign, a big concern of yours is also safety. You need to be aware where the teams are in the world, and if they're somewhere dangerous, or as my editor put it, kidnappy, then it's very important to be across where they are, how many they are, what they're doing, because obviously our main goal is to get everybody home safe. And then if we get a great story out of it, then that is also amazing. Um, a new thing on foreign is that you also deal with the Skype and sort of Zoom interviews during the day. ITN at the beginning of the pandemic bought 2 laptops, and nobody knew what to do with them. And so we've kind of been figuring that out, building up our sort of competence on Skypes and Zooms, and sort of your responsibility will basically be in the same way that you would send a camera to sort of set up the recording and make sure that all makes it onto the server and things like that. There's also quite a lot of agency material to deal with on foreign, so stuff like AP and stuff, or Rupley or EBU, and these are all sort of names that maybe aren't household names, but you will very soon become familiar with. London is sort of a scaled down version of home. You work on the London region, who share an office with Network News. And so we kind of get lent out to them as well, and it's all great fun, and you get to sort of go out and do stuff more for them because it's more of a regional news setup. And then planning and producing. Planning is sort of forward planning, so looking at the next couple of days, weeks, bidding, setting up logistics. Producing, you're sort of at the beck and call of the editor, and so you may go out and do all kinds of stuff: interviews, doorsteps, lives, packages, all that kind of thing.
Cool. And so you've mentioned a lot of stuff that comes under your role. So obviously organization is probably a massive part of your job. And as you said, safety when people are in kidnappy areas. But are there any other skills that you think are like really essential for your job?
Well, so I think the most essential thing is that you kind of are a doer. So like that you're not afraid to kind of step up and do something. When news breaks, sort of sometimes it seems like you're kind of in the middle of a tornado and everybody knows what to do and you're just kind of sat there like, huh. And so having the skill to either just try and do something, or even better, ask what you can do. This is something that I've spoken to with one of my editors, who actually was the one who hired me. And a skill that she really puts above many other things is the willingness to ask questions. Because if you ask somebody how to do something, they might be annoyed with you for 30 seconds while they explain it. But if you don't know how to do something, try and do it wrong, then they'll be annoyed with you for 10 minutes while they try and figure out how to undo what you've just done wrong. So I think the being sort of a doer and not being afraid to ask questions, along with, of course, as you say, sort of a responsible logistical individual. Responsible is especially important because you kind of, not in a nasty way, but sort of are at the bottom of the ladder. And so it kind of ends with you. So if somebody hands you something, you're going to have to deal with it. You can't just pass it on. And so having that sense of responsibility and sort of seeing things through, I think will be really good. Phone skills, but that goes for any journalist job. You'll be doing quite a lot of phone bashing. And if you're good at it or can get good at it, then that'll serve you well. And this is also something that goes for any journalism role, but if you're socially competent and good with all kinds of people, that'll really serve you well as well, because you need to have good relations with the media manager, because they'll save you when a file comes in and it's a bit corrupt and you can't quite figure out what to do with it. And you need to have good relations with the cameras, because if you ask them to stay for an extra hour on an icy cold doorstep in November, they're more likely not to kick up a fuss if you ask nicely and if they know you as a nice person. So I think all of those skills are all important kind of in their own ways.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you mentioned asking for help is particularly important. I think, like, for anyone who's applying for jobs at the moment, don't lie about what you can and can't do. It's way better to be honest and then show your willingness to learn how to do other things. And speaking about learning skills and stuff, is there any work experience you'd recommend or anything? Because you interned at KMTV, didn't you, before graduating and everything?
I did intern at KMTV, and I think that might have very well been what got me the job, to be honest. Obviously, not everyone is lucky enough to have a local TV station sort of in their university, which was the case for me. But I think if you know early on that you want to do TV, then definitely try and get any kind of work experience in TV, because what will serve you well in a role like assistant news editor is knowing a little bit about how a newsroom works. When I came to ITN, I didn't know what a producer was, which is sort of because from the local channel that I came from, reporter, producer, and editor were all the same person. And so if you get a chance to kind of have a look at a bigger newsroom, then really sort of look and see, well, what's the workflow here? Sort of who tells who what to do, and how sort of do things come into the building? How do they go out of the building? Who's responsible for those different stages? If you can work that out, then that's, I think you're already halfway to being a good A&E.
Yeah. And if, because like you said, not everywhere will have a local TV station, but if people can get experience maybe doing sort of packages for online outlets, would you say that's comparable to TV, or is there like a big difference between what you'd produce for, like, I was going to say Mail Online, they don't have a TV station, but just generally what you'd make for online versus actual going on air?
Sure. I mean, obviously ITN or ITV News also has a digital side. We have itvnews.co.uk, I would assume the website is. And I do think that their work process is slightly different. They, in many ways, have less time than we do, because we do have, like, I don't know, 6 hours or 5 hours between the bulletins. And obviously with online, the deadlines are running. But I think I think the workflow of getting, say, a package online is very much the same workflow as getting a package on a program, especially if you're working in program news, so not BBC or Sky, but what we do at ITV. So yeah, I think if you can't get into a TV station, if you can sort of get any experience that gets used in somewhere where they use cameras and go out in the field and send material back in any form, then I think that'll put you in a good place.
And aside from actual, like, traditional work experience, do you think that going to uni or having an NCTJ qualification is like a big part of getting into broadcast roles, or do you think it can be done without them?
So for my specific role, the NCTJ was preferred but not essential. And actually, I can probably think of 4 or 5 colleagues who didn't do a media degree, but sort of did maybe English literature. Some of them did history. I think those are quite common avenues to then sort of migrate into journalism from. So by no means is a journalism degree essential. NCTJ training is also not essential, but they will provide you with some of that training. So for example, for my colleagues who didn't do a media degree or didn't come in with an NCTJ degree, they sort of make sure that you get set up to do at least media law and court reporting. And then I would imagine probably later along the line, they'd probably offer the broadcast module as well. What I think is, if you have the opportunity to take the NCTJ and you feel like it's something that you can do, then I think you should definitely do it. Because especially, oddly enough, the copyright and news access parts of media law will really stand you in good stead, because when you're licensing things, it's really helpful to know who you can and cannot nab things from without sort of going through the process of paying for it. And stuff about children, for example, the Ofcom code, especially on children, you need to know, because otherwise you'll land yourself and your organization in big trouble. So I think if you have access to that training, then don't forego it. Definitely go for it. If you don't have it, if you can show other skills, they'll help you. At least ITN, I know, will help you get it.
Yeah. And so do you think working at ITN is somewhere that you can do a little bit of learning on the job? Like, you don't have to go in as a fully fledged broadcast journalist ready to make perfect packages?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't come in as a fully fledged broadcast journalist. I'm obviously on the input side rather than the output side. That's probably worth mentioning. So I don't actually edit anything. I sort of do all the legwork that it takes to get something to an editable stage. The ability to learn on the job in my role is probably the best ability you could come in with. I didn't come in as a fully trained anything. I kind of stumbled in straight from uni and sort of was just like, hey, what's going on here? And in the year that I worked there, I think I look back at myself on those first couple of days and think, what on earth were you doing? But that's a really good thing. So I think because I happen to know the people who interview for these jobs because they interviewed me, what they're looking for is that you can think on your feet and that you have a sense of what is news, what is journalism, and you have that kind of want to help and want to sort of deal with all these sort of logistics puzzles. And whether or not you have a gold standard NCTJ or a media degree from a really highly acclaimed university, or you have like a portfolio busting with all kinds of stuff, I think is less important. Because this is an entry-level role, it is a training role, and so they also do expect there to be a certain amount of training involved in getting you to where they want you to be.
Yeah. And then with like cameras and mics and stuff, is there like any particular equipment you use, or is it the stuff that's like fairly standard no matter what newsroom you've worked in?
So I don't know the specific make of our cameras. All the camera people seem to have different cameras. But it doesn't really matter too much, because as an assistant news editor, you're not going to be touching those cameras, hopefully. We'll leave that up to the professionals and those educated in the field. In terms of editing, ITN edits on Avid at the minute, but they're sort of making a slow transition into Premiere. So if you know either of those two, and I hear that Avid and Premiere kind of are related loosely, then it might help you out. But as I say, I don't really edit anything. So it depends. If you come in knowing that you want to switch to output, then knowing Avid or knowing Premiere is definitely going to help you out.
Has your job changed because of COVID at all? And then how have you dealt with any changes?
So my job has definitely changed because of COVID, but more in what I do than say where I do it. So my role is one of the roles that has still been coming into the office, because it is a role that you really need to be in the office, and you especially need to be sat next to, or as close as sort of social distancing allows, to your editor to kind of keep up with what's going on throughout the day. You couldn't really do that, I think, without being there. But the way that the day progresses has changed a lot. We used to have live lunchtime guests coming in. So we used to be booking taxis and taking them in from reception and stuff. We haven't had a guest since, I don't know, mid-February probably. They come in on Skype and Zoom now, and so then you deal with those restrictions instead. We also work very differently with our camera operators. They used to all sit in a crew room at Grayson Road, but now they start from home, which I quite like, because it gives you a more natural spread of people. So I know, well, if I'm looking for something in East London, I'll know which camera people are closest to there. And then obviously safety on the job has been sort of an ongoing conversation that we've had, and I think all broadcasters have had. It's that thing of sort of journalists run the opposite way. So if there's a fire everybody's running away from, we'll be running towards it. So safety has always been a concern of ours, but especially during COVID, we've had to talk a lot about, well, do we just as principle never do interviews inside, for example? Some camera people are comfortable with it, some are not, and we have to respect what they kind of are and aren't comfortable with. And so a question that I ask interviews quite a lot on the phone is there a park near you? Do you have a garden? Can that garden be accessed without going in the house? So it's all those like little things to make sure that the shoots are safe. And now coming up to winter, that has been made a little bit more complicated because it gets dark at 4 o'clock. And so if you're trying to do an interview in a park after 4 o'clock, then your camera operator needs more light, or you need to try and do it early in the day. So it's all those little things, they all play into how you schedule your day and do your job. And then there's the practical considerations of COVID that again relate mostly to the people in the field, but they can no longer go to a Costa and use the bathroom or get a quick coffee, or maybe sometimes they can't even find somewhere to get lunch. And so all those kind of considerations we've had to sort of take on board and try and work out how to deal with. So yeah, my job definitely has changed with COVID. And it'll be really interesting to see how much of that changes back once COVID kind of blows over a little bit, because I suspect a lot of things won't change back.
Yeah. And you mentioned, like, because everything is online at the moment and you're not able to go to parks or interview outside anymore, some of it might be over Zoom. Have you ever had to deal with any technical difficulties, like relating to online interviews?
So many. We had a horrible bank holiday weekend right at the beginning of lockdown where we had these two new laptops, and nobody really knew how they worked. And so we were like recording all these interviews, and then they wouldn't go on the server right because of frame rate issues and this and this and that. And we were getting closer to, airtime. So I've had to call people back and do it again because the recording didn't work, or had the poor media manager slaving away trying to work out what was wrong with the file that I have generated and how we can sort of save it. So it's been a massive learning curve. But at this point, I think I feel quite confident with sort of using Zoom and using Skype. And it's been really interesting because we've also in that way sort of had some input in how the work process for that looks like now. So yeah, definitely we have had our battles with Skype and Zoom and FaceTime and whatnot. But I think for now we're doing all right. And I think that has extended our news reach because it now means we can get to people that we couldn't get to before because they maybe didn't want us to come all the way out, or they're too far away or whatever. And so I think it's only made our news coverage better, and it's made me more skillful. So that's good in more than one way.
Yeah. And when you are contacting people just because there was an issue with footage, because I'm sure, I mean, not even related to Zoom, this is for people who are going out and maybe their camera, like memory card got corrupted or something. How do you have those conversations where you're just like, there's been a technical malfunction, can I talk to you again, please?
Honestly, I just do it the way you did it there. I just say, hi, we just spoke a minute ago. I'm so sorry, but the file is corrupted or whatever was wrong with it. Do you have maybe just 10 minutes to just quickly do it again? And 9 out of 10 times, both because people are in lockdown, they have nothing else to do, and also because people are nice, they will give you that time again. And that's happened to me before before when it was real cameras. Like sometimes we've had to just do things again, and it's always better to be honest about it and just say, look, sorry, I messed up, do you have time? And yeah, most of the time, like unless it's the prime minister and he has to run off somewhere, most of the time people will have time. And so I think the best way to approach that is just honestly.
Yeah.
And thank people for their time.
yeah, that's a big one. And the last thing is there anything about your job that people might not know, or maybe something that people don't consider about like editorial roles?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that I would say is that my job, even though it maybe sounds a bit complicated, and I hope it didn't make it more complicated than it is an entry-level role. And so it is, even though other companies, you might think assistant news editor is quite high up, this is an entry-level role, and it's open to people straight out of uni, or even like some of the A&Es have been working like while they were still at uni. And so definitely don't be scared off by it and think you can't do it because the title sounds a bit intimidating. And I think that's true for all jobs, not just mine.